everyone. I am super excited. This is episode 1 of a brand new show produced by Let's Talk Supply Chain, sponsored by Coupa. And I'm only one of the hosts for On the Margin. That's the title of this show. And we are going to bring so much exciting stuff for you. So my name is Sarah Barnes-Humphrey. I'm the founder and host of Let's Talk Supply Chain, the Blended Podcast, and founder of the Blended Pledge. And now, without further ado, I need to bring up the famous MVK, who's going to be my co-host for this show. Hello. How are you?
How's it going? This is long overdue. I am so excited. I cannot wait. I'm so excited that I actually put on the jersey of my favorite football club, Ajax, so that all of our listeners know when you talk about football, this is the jersey that matters. Okay.
Well, and also it goes with you. I mean, you're one of the most famous people in procurement, right, MVK?
Yeah, well, once you hit, the top of a magazine, the cover of a magazine, I think is the epitome of famousness, I guess. So did that. I am the spend setter, the inaugural one at Coupa as well. But now, all kidding aside, I love what I do. I love procurement. I've loved procurement for over 20 years now. And just getting to do what I do every day at the company I work for, it's almost like living the dream. So yeah, it's been pretty amazing.
Yeah, and the fact that you and I get to come together, I mean, we've been talking about this for years. So this is going to be a great show. We're going to be talking all about procurement. But before we get into that, let everybody know. I mean, there's only a few people out there that don't know who you are, but tell those people who you are, what you do, and maybe a little bit about Coupa.
Yeah, very quickly. And my name is Michael van Keulen, MVK. I've been the CPO, the Chief Procurement Officer at Coupa for almost 5 years now. I've been in procurement and supply chain for well over 15 years. I was the head of procurement at Lululemon, helped the company scale and grow to what it is today, which is a $10 billion global apparel company. I was at VF Corp, was given opportunity there to lead global transformation at a company that owns like North Face and Vans and Timberland and all these other fabulous brands. And before that, I was at Foot Locker, where I got passionate and excited about sourcing and finance, which is my background, is accounting at Arthur Andersen back in the mid-90s. So, I'm a finance guy that still forever recovering accountant, I sometimes say, that finally made the pivot to driving real impact and real business and real transformation, which is what procurement and supply chain is all about. So, I've lived in 5 countries now. I've traveled the world many times over, and some people call me the jet set CPO, which I think is a little funny, facetious at the same time, where people think all I do is on a plane and in a Marriott, which is sometimes true. But yeah, I love what I do at Coupa. Coupa is the leader in total spend management. We've been doing this for over a decade. We help companies multiply their margins. We can talk about that. We've got fabulous customers. We're about to be joined by one of my personal favorites, to be honest, and a strategic partner to us as well. But yeah, it's just been so great to be the CPO at a company that I've bought twice in my career, and just to be here with 3,000 plus Coupanians and represent this organization is truly the highlight of my career so far.
Well, and you're just so passionate, like you ooze passion for procurement and spend management. So we named this show On the Margins. Talk to us about what people can expect. I know we've got a really great guest coming up. We're going to be doing this on the fourth Wednesday of every single month. And we're going to be coming at you with hot topics. Some of your amazing clients are going to be joining us as well, who I got to interview at Inspire just a few months ago. And it was incredible to hear their stories and their passion for procurement and what you're doing over at Coupa. So talk to us about what On the Margins mean. What can people expect from this show?
Yeah, I think we're just going to be talking about a variety of topics, hot topics that we're working on, maybe some disruption that's happening. How do we combat inflation? How do we optimize our operating models in our organizations? How do we extract more value out of the spend, de-risk supply chain, ESG, diversity? There's so much to talk about. We're going to pick a topic at every single fourth Wednesday of the month. It could be a hot topic. It could just be an underutilized topic in procurement. We're going to bring not just customers, but it could be a thought leader. It could be an economist. It could be a whole bunch of different people that we we're going to bring on. And the intent is to make it light, make it fun, which is not hard with you on there. But to just make it light and fun. There's so much out there, so much content. I think the intent of us is to kind of make it light, make it a little bit funny, sometimes facetious, maybe talk about some scars, maybe therapy, but to make it light and to make it fun. This is not about selling Coupa. This is really about us, the profession that we love, that we are passionate about. And hopefully we get to inspire some people to bring some of what we're talking about, bring it back into their own organizations and take their own procurement and their own profession and their own careers to the next level. And if we achieve that over the next months as we mature and as we learn and hear from our listeners, I think mission accomplished.
Well, plus we're going to have trivia at the end of the show. So you need to listen carefully throughout the show because we're going to be asking you a question and we have some amazing giveaways. So stay tuned because that is coming. And just for fun, there was a question that I was asking some people when I was at Inspire just a few months ago. And it was, which is the most expense, Dunkin' or Starbucks? And I don't think anybody would be surprised to hear that Starbucks is the most expense item in procurement. Did that kind of surprise you? I mean, it didn't really surprise me, but I thought it was a question.
We are here to have fun and to be a little facetious. I am European. I am a coffee snob, as some people in Europe are. And truth be told, that I never go to Starbucks.
Oh, see, I always have to go to Starbucks because I need coconut milk.
Yeah, no, I understand. I mean, of course, the brand and what the company has done is amazing. But I'd rather have a double espresso at a local barista in Italy than to go to Starbucks. I mean, and it's just, it's taste and it's, as a coffee snob, I don't think you go to Starbucks. But if you want a triple macchiato latte with extra foam and an extra, you go to Starbucks.
No, I love it. I love it. And so, we're going to have trivia. We're going to have giveaways. And you just talked about therapy. I hope you're going to take the therapist role because I have a sign back in my home office that says, I'm not your therapist. I don't want to take on that role. So I hope
I was talking about procurement therapy. All the other stuff, I'm still learning myself. So.
Well, you never know what you're going to get on this show. So you're going to have to tune in every single month to see. All right. Now it's time to bring up our guest. Now, Jen is from Salesforce, and you're going to be doing a little bit of an introduction. I will give everybody a little bit of a tidbit. Make sure you listen for the next few minutes because it might come up at the end of the show. All right, Jen. Welcome to On the Margins. How are you today?
I'm great. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Good. It's super awesome to have you here and talking about the topic that we're going to be talking about today. So MVK, do a little bit of an introduction. Tell us about Jen and your relationship with Jen and Salesforce and all of that good stuff.
Yeah, when we were brainstorming and saying, hey, who should be the inaugural guest on our show, honestly, Jen, you were the first one that came up for me. I know you're passionate about ESG, building teams. You're passionate about procurement. You've been in procurement for a very long time. Little less than me, but but you've been doing this for a while. And of course, we are strategically extremely important for each other from a partnership perspective, but also on a personal level. The first time I met you and when you got into your role, and we'll talk about that in a second. But it was very easy for us to come up with who should be the first person on this podcast. And so we're really honored. Such a privilege to have you here.
Super honored to be here. Thanks very much.
So why don't you tell everybody who you are, what you do, and how you got in touch with MVK? What's the story behind it?
Sure. So I am Jen Brown. I'm based in San Francisco. I have the pleasure of being the Chief Procurement Officer at Salesforce. Been with the company for 11 and a half years now, running, different parts of procurement along the way. And then about 2.5 years ago, I was appointed to Chief Procurement Officer. And we, Coupa and Salesforce have been partners for a long time on both sides. We use each other's technology. And, I've been really familiar with Coupa and how it's helped our growth over the years and how Coupa has grown over the years. And Michael was, super welcoming and just cold reached out to me when I took the job and just welcomed me into the position in the community. And I thought that was so nice to do. And I really appreciated his time and effort to do that.
Wow. Cold outreach actually works, everybody. But
Hey,
being
cold calls. Well, let me rephrase. Let me be clear. Cold calls, CPO to CPO, absolutely fine. Cold calls, sales to CPOs,
different.
Okay,
and then we met for lunch after that and hit it off, and it was great. And I've been to the Coupa conference, and so we see each other at industry events all the time. But yeah, it was a really nice welcome into the space, and it's all history from there.
And it was great food. I remember where you
yes.
took me. Really delicious. So yeah, it was good lunch. I enjoyed it.
Well, I absolutely love to hear it. Now, the topic that we're talking about today is the number one thing companies need to combat shrinking margins. Now, MVK, before I get to Jen and ask how would you define margin erosion, why is this topic so important? Why did we want to pick this one for the first show?
Yeah, look, I mean, there is a whole bunch of stuff going on in the macro. There is all sorts of stuff, from a geopolitical unrest to climate change to inflation to interest rates, monetary policies. Elections are coming up. There is a bunch of stuff going on. And it's hard for us in procurement to have any sort of influence on what's happening. But what we can do is to think about how are we reacting and responding to whatever scenario is out there. How do we have the right visibility and controls and mechanisms in place? How do we have the right strategic partnerships with our suppliers and, equally important, our internal stakeholders? What are our objectives? Where are we growing? That is really what is at the heart of procurement. And how we identify this margin erosion zone is, where are you operating today, and where should you or could you be operating if you have the right blend between people, process, technology, if you operationalize yourselves appropriately. And that's why on the margins is really what that means is where can procurement really help our companies achieve their strategic objectives faster, with less resource, more efficiently, and ultimately drive more value out of the spend. I mean, that's ultimately what we want. It's not about cutting cost. And I know, Jenny, you and I fundamentally agree there. And I'd love for you to of course chime in. That's really what this on the margins is about. That's what margin multiplier is all about. Is come on, let's raise the bar and let's support our companies irrespective of what goes on in the outside world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Jen, talk to us about that. Do you agree with that? How do you define margin erosion?
So I think about it in a couple of ways. So there's everything that MVK just said about all of these external factors and pressures and ways that we need to be, very thoughtful around how we plan our spend and where we're going to make investments to sort of accommodate for margin erosion that we can't control, right? And just being able to think about where the biggest impacts are going to be based on either the raw materials or labor costs or whatever it is that's actually increasing over time most significantly, and then sort of backing into, regardless of what company you're in, what you're buying for that company and what you think is going to be most at risk for pricing pressure and margin pressure, and being able to sort of go back to your budgeting process and assess how much of that you intended to buy, and can you scale back, and can you sort of trim in other areas that maybe aren't as exposed or aren't as necessary as some of the components that you need to buy that are suffering from some of the margin pressure. But then there's another way I think about it also, and this has been something that's top of mind for me in the company that I work for, because we've been on such a growth journey for the last 25 years, is that a lot of margin erosion comes from just the speed in which you need to operate, in procurement and then in every other part of the company. And in a lot of ways, it is very easy just to, or sometimes necessary, it's not that people are just picking the easy path, right? But sometimes it's super necessary to just, sacrifice maybe a longer term more thoughtful, more strategic approach to something that's going to scale for a quick fix that's going to get it done today, right? And I'm talking more, when I think about that, I think more about operational processes where maybe you start, hiring at a faster pace so you can have humans, prop up a department or a function, instead of thinking about how to better deploy technology or how to better deploy automation or how to have sort of onshore, offshore strategies, because all of that takes time and effort, right? And sometimes when companies are growing really fast, they don't really have the time to take a step back and think about, how do I do this thing, stand up this function or this department in a way in which it's going to scale over time. And I see a lot of margin erosion happen in that growth period as well, just in company structure.
Well, and do you think because of all those questions and all the different things that we have to think about around margin erosion, around growth, which you just talked about, do you think that's why companies are worried about it? And if they're not worried about it right now, should they be?
Yeah, I mean, any public company has to worry about what their operating margin is. It's something that as they're growing, it's a little bit easier as a growth company to sort of say, well, we're reinvesting all of our margin and growth. But at some point, the street's going to expect something different, right? Or your investors are going to expect something different if it's a pre-IPO company. So, there has to be, and it's a difficult thing to unwind once you stand up a function or a department. If we're talking about sort of the human capital part of margin erosion, if you stand up a function and you didn't have the time to stand it up in a way that's going to scale from a cost perspective over time as you grow, then that is a little harder to unwind. And it's not impossible. Everybody does it all the time, right? But you have to be very intentional and take a step back and sort of, then build out that plan and structure it and roll it out in a way that makes sense, that's not disruptive to the organization.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it resonates really well. I mean, if you look at what Coupa has gone through, high growth, grow at all costs, right? That's what we were doing for many, many years. Of course, that changed a few years ago. And so that totally resonates. Even with ourselves internally, we are in the middle of redefining our own business process, our own people, our own process, and our own technology. What do we need if we want to continue to scale? We want to scale to a 2 billion and ultimately 5 billion. We're a little bit behind Salesforce. That is our holy grail, though. But I mean, that totally resonates with me, and that's exactly what we're going through right now as we speak at Coupa internally. So yeah, totally agree.
So then, what strategies have you embraced, maybe as a leader at Salesforce, to combat some of that margin erosion? Can you share with some of that with us, because this goes into best practices and how other leaders can sort of implement in their own organizations?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a little bit of an easy answer because of where I work. So the first answer is going to be technology. And in a lot of ways, either with, our partnership with Coupa, or technology that we use with trusted partners, or technology that we develop and deploy, sort of a part of Salesforce's bread and butter has always been workflow management, and our ability to very easily, with clicks, not code, be able to stand up technology solutions that can help us, right? That can speed things up and scale. And I think about, something that I'm building out right now, that, as we're thinking about the imperative and the necessity of building out a level of completeness as it relates to our third party sort of risk and governance and oversight, which is a hot topic in every boardroom and every company, every technology company. And as we think about, our ability to move from this place of picking, where we think the most risk sits, and then getting very complete about canvassing and continuous monitoring in that space, being able to use technology to get to a place of completeness and automation in being able to have oversight over the entire supplier community, right? So you think about, it from a manual perspective, and what you have the bandwidth to do when you stand up a function like that, super critical function, you can maybe, have continuous oversight over your top 100 high risk suppliers, right? Or high risk engagements. And, with what technology is bringing us now in this fourth industrial revolution of AI and agents, is the ability to do these kinds of things where people like me and MVK who, lose nights of sleep over the third party risk that you're not thinking about, right? It's always going to be the one you're not paying attention to that's going to get you. This technology brings us to a place where we can do all of it, right? We can take the entire supplier community and put them through the same rigor and same oversight. And so technology is the first and sort of easiest answer. And I recognize that depending on what company and what industry you're in, that might not be as available to you as it is to me, but I am going to capitalize on it and use it as often as I can for as long as I'm here. But then, the other thing that I think about, and I think we've done a really good job of this over the years at Salesforce. And I take credit for some of the block and tackle, but the vision was really set out by CPOs before me in this role at Salesforce. But really being able to real time sort of balance load between what happens in our headquarters offices from a sourcing and procurement support perspective and what we use offshore partners and offshore resources to do for some of the more transactional work. And I see a lot of companies that grow and are very successful over time at building great sourcing and procurement organizations. And then they have to, at some point in their growth, sort of pause, take a step back and think about how they shift a lot of the more transactional work to lower cost, centers, providers, shared services. And we've been on that journey from the beginning. So it's really interesting when I take a look back at when I first started. Our headquarters team is roughly the same size as it was 10 years ago, 11 years ago. And we've just been, as we've grown in the beginning of that journey, we deployed a strategy where we were always checking ourselves and making sure that we were load balancing the work.
Yeah, that's amazing. And that, again, resonates really well. I mean, of course, I came from retail, for those of you, the people that listen to what my intro was. Slightly different a little bit, but still very fundamentally the same, where technology helps you simplify, remove administrative complexity, especially for the stores, and just really allow them to optimize the resources that we have in doing what they do best, which is, in Salesforce's case, of course, build fabulous technology. In Lulu's case, service the guests that come into the stores and want to be converted, and ideally buy black stretchy yoga pants and maybe some add-on shirts and other stuff as well. But the point I'm trying to make here is, like, removing administrative complexity allows you to really optimize the resources that you have at your disposal. So I mean, it really resonates, and I think it works across industries. So that makes total sense. Look, Jen, one of the things I always love to talk about is to talk a little bit about scars, and not maybe literally scars, because that maybe is a little crazy, but like, what kind of things have you seen did not work well? I mean, of course, you've had a fabulous career. You're at the height of your career. You work for a fabulous company. But what were some of the maybe one thing that you said, hey, I tried this and that was just a complete disaster?
Yeah, there are plenty to choose from. Anybody who pretends that they haven't had a whole bunch of failures along the way is not being honest about it, or they just weren't paying attention.
Or they haven't tried hard enough.
Right. They didn't go out far enough on that limb to have it break.
Yeah.
But, I would say probably one of the first learnings, and it has stayed with me mainly because of how traumatic it was, but it stayed with me because it was really important. It was an important learning, mainly because it was born out of the mistakes that I made in this area were born out of the best of intentions, right? And it was born out of all of those things about yourself that you think are really admirable qualities, like your ability to really, tough it out and to push the boulder up the hill and to make hard things happen and get complicated projects across the finish line. But when I came in, I had there was just sort of this awakening in the company of some of the designations that we had to have, FedRAMP, High Trust, et cetera, to be able to sell cloud product to the federal government or to banking institutions. And we needed to have a system that where we could, vet all of our suppliers in many different ways, right? So it was more, we needed something more than just a supplier onboarding tool. We really needed like a compliance vetting tool that was going to be able to help us have, you know, a trackable, auditable review that we could then go back to either see what some of the open items were from a risk perspective that we want to have mitigated over time, or just, you know, demonstrate to auditors that, you know, everybody has gone through this very rigorous, detailed review of architecture stack and penetration testing and technology reviews and all of the things that we need to do with, you know, trust and data information, customer data as our number one priority as a company, right? So it hit on the tuning fork of all of the things that are most important to us as a company, which is trust and securing data and making sure that our customers' data is secure. So I needed to put this process in place. I had sort of inherited a tool that was already, you know, signed for, and we just really hadn't started implementation. Now, I probably tried to push that boulder up the hill for about 18 months to 2 years, I would say. And we should have had the tool fully implemented by then. But I was just getting used to the company, just getting used to the business partners I had to work with and all of the different areas. And we were just sort of cobbling this whole program together across all of the different functions. So, you know, probably 5 or 6 times during the that I would call it 2 years, 2-year period, the CPO at the time sat me down and asked me, like, is this the right partner? Like, is this the right provider? Do you want to just call it and maybe look at something else? And I was like, no, I can make this work. And lo and behold, it was probably at the 18-month mark. I think we, you know, it took us about 2 years to spin up a follow-up relationship that ended up being very quick to execute, very successful. We were super happy. But it was probably at that 18-month mark where I sat down and I was like, self, you have to stop considering this a personal failure. The failure has been that you have hung on to this for way longer than you should have. You should have called a year ago. You were, you know, you have all the support that you need from your boss, from your leadership. They've been very kindly and supportively asking you if you wanted an out. There was no glory in trying to make this happen. So that's one that stuck with me, because there are so many similar situations where, you know, what was it? The brilliant poet Kenny Rogers said, you have to know when to hold him and know when to fold him. And that was a really time-consuming lesson in not being willing to fold them early enough.
Yeah, as much as in procurement, being loyal, and I've made similar mistakes. Yeah, if it makes you feel any better, you know, loyalty, trust, you know, those things are really important. Resilience, and you know, like just going at it and being relentless almost.
Yeah.
And don't let that muddy your judgment. And sometimes you have to trust your gut, right?
Yeah.
But no, that totally resonates with me, and I can. It's not my for to share, but I mean, I can totally relate to that.
Well, and it was this existential battle between all of these qualities that you know are good qualities, but an outcome that just was not going to happen.
Like kind of put a square into a round hole type thing. I really appreciate you sharing that story, because I know that a lot of our audience are going to be able to resonate with that and know that they're not alone, because, you know, these things happen all the time. Now, I know we are winding this down, but before you go, what's one thing procurement leaders can start doing differently now to combat margin erosion? Just one thing, one really quick thing.
This is going to sound like a shameless plug, so it's not meant to be, but regardless of what tool, what partner, what company you use, learning as much as you can right now about the capabilities that AI agents and AI deployment in product that you're considering implementing, or product that you could potentially leverage in your department, but also on behalf of your company, right? So when you're working with your CIO and you're considering software products that you're going to buy, you know, not at all a plug, because everybody who, you know, knows what they're doing right now is incorporating AI into their product. it's very quickly going to become table stakes in the technology industry. A lot of product is going to be developed AI native. And so educating yourself on what the capabilities are, what's real, what is commercially viable right now versus what's still an idea, and getting really crisp on that is probably the best use of a CPO's time right now.
I love that. Well, Jen, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing so many incredible insights. Make sure you go and follow Jennifer Brown from Salesforce over on LinkedIn. I hope that's okay.
Yes, of course.
All right. We'll see you again soon because we got to have you back for all those stories.
Absolutely. I'm sure I'll have more to share. They come up all the time. You have to remember what Kenny Rogers said.
All right. Well, now, thank you, Jen. We'll see you later.
Thanks, Jen.
So now we're transitioning very quickly over to trivia because we know we're coming up on time. So the question that we have for everybody, and get ready because the first person who answers this correctly in the comments is going to win a pickleball set. I mean, pickleball has blown up all over the globe. We know you want one. So hopefully you've been listening and make sure you put that in the comments, your answer in the comments. So the question is, how did MBK and Jennifer meet? Go. Put your answer in the comments and we will be announcing the winner after the show ends. So stay tuned, stay in the comments. We will tag you and we will tag the winner very, very, very shortly. All right, MBK, wrap us up.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, well, look, thanks everyone for joining us. Sarah, such a pleasure. I'm so excited. Jen, thanks again. I mean, she is a rock star, trailblazer. Highly encourage everyone to follow her. The work that Salesforce is doing, of course, I mean, we all know, but super impressed and really appreciative. Look, please join us next month. We hope this is resonating. We will be exploring more overlooked aspects of procurement, supply chain, finance, IT, revealing insights, advice on how to achieve profitability, durable growth, and obviously make our margins multiply.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. Go and visit coupa.com/on-the-margins for more and make sure that you don't miss the next episode. We can't wait to see you. We want to hear from you. Reach out to either myself or